What about the miracles found in the New Testament? Is it possible for a 20th century historian to come to the conclusion that Jesus really did perform miracles and really did rise from the dead? This question has been debated by scholars over the last 100 years over what is called the first quest, then the second quest, and now the third quest for the historical Jesus. And on this question about miracles, Dr. Habermas is an acknowledged expert who in the past has debated people like Dr. Anthony Flew, the world's foremost philosophical atheist, on this topic. Plus, Dr. Habermas has written scores of scholarly articles on this question, and I'd like you to listen to his answer.
Primarily, New Testament scholars speak today of three periods in which the investigation of the historical Jesus flourished. The classical period. Now, there are some prototypes. You can go back to English deism, you can go to German rationalism like Reimarus, but the prototypical, the heyday of lives of Jesus were during the liberal period, what's called Old Liberalism, German liberalism. Really, it's oftentimes it's the philosophical side of German idealism coming out into theology. And what happens for over 100 years is that everybody has a life of Jesus. In fact, a lot of these books are just called Life of Jesus. And the liberal presupposition, just to give a general overview here, is we can basically use the Gospels as historical minus two big no-nos. One is dogmatic theology. Don't say Jesus was Son of God, rose from the dead. We don't like miracles. We don't like dogmatic theology. And just confirmation kind of argument. And they don't like to talk about the supernatural. So they want the Gospels, what they would just call, give me just the history. Take the theology out, dogmatic theology, take the miracles out. What's left? That's historical Jesus. Now, for a little over 100 years, that's what was called the quest for the historical Jesus. Albert Schweitzer's famous book, just after the turn of the century, lined all those early liberals up, say like David Strauss. Now, David Strauss is a forerunner to Rudolf Bultmann. After the first quest, you have what some people call a no-quest period. Rudolf Bultmann, Karl Barth. And they did not think we should be going after the historical Jesus because faith is sufficient. Faith is not based on history. Apologetics is anathema. So you've got a classical liberal period, German liberalism, life of Jesus, followed by a no-quest period. That's the reigns of Barth and Bultmann. Barth comes on the scene 1916, 1918, with his famous epistle to the Romans there right at the close of World War I. Bultmann becomes a big commodity, a hot commodity about 1940, and just a little after that with his essay, New Testament and Mythology. And up until about 1960, it's not terribly popular to do any more historical Jesus studies. But in the 1950s, Ernst Käsemann, Günter Bornkamm, James Robinson, students of Bultmann said, no, wait a minute, we're going a little too far here. And in a couple of 1950s, very important publications like Günter Bornkamm's Jesus of Nazareth, they said, our mentor, Rudolf Bultmann, is going a little too far. Faith is not based on history, they argued. That's true. But we do need an historical Jesus, or at least in part, or we are doomed to let him slip into the pages of legend. So we can say some things about the historical Jesus, but like their mentor, Bultmann, they didn't think faith was based on history. That's the second quest for the historical Jesus, or what was called at the time the New Quest. That was a short-lived movement. What is being called now the third quest for the historical Jesus, there's some forerunners in the 1970s, but in the 80s and 90s, we're seeing an outpouring of books from every theological persuasion, far left, moderate, middle, right. And these books tell you what we can know about Jesus. Now, this is the most fragmented of the three periods. It takes us right up until the present. But this is what all the books from the third quest basically have in common. There's a general agreement that Jesus is a very Jewish fellow, and we want to look at Jesus against his Jewish background. Jewish anthropology is very important. Jewish sociology is very important. And they want to put Jesus as a man of his time back into the Jewish calendar, not the Gnostic calendar of Rudolf Bultmann. But those are basically the three quests. The 19th century, 100 years of lives of Jesus, the New Quest, just a couple decades, and now we're into a couple decades of the third quest, and it's going strong. This is arguably, the historical Jesus is arguably the hottest topic in theology today.